System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Tuesday, February 17th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Amoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. Amoja, hello. Happy Tuesday. We had a week off. We were trying to get some technical issues figured out, as of course we all are trying to do in this technological world. How are you, my friend? How have you been?
Man, I'm lovely.
You want to talk about some geopolitics? What do you think?
Let's get to it.
Massive buildup of naval forces, military forces around Iran. It's been a big topic of conversation for us, been a big topic of conversation for the rest of the world. It looks as if the war that happened between Iran and Israel last year just kind of been low intensity, low escalation, but at any time that looks like it could, escalate to a very hot war, which would be very dangerous for the region. We had Scott Bessent come out last week, said, "Hey,
giving the game away.
We trying to destabilize them, baby. We trying to take over. Look." And they're trying to throw this in there. Like, this is what, remember there was a whole thing like, oh, no more color revolutions, no more regime change, but that's what they're trying to normalize.
Right.
So let me show you this video. This is from a person. This person's not a Republican. They're not in the MAGA realm, right? So you would think that they would have a much different view of, how this should be tackled, right? This should be handled in Iran. So this is Nancy Pelosi. Just want to let you hear what she had to say.
Is there a way to sort of bring about the regime falling without using American force, I guess is the question there.
Well, use economic forces.
Yeah.
Use economic forces. There are ways that cripple their economy. And some of that has been in the works.
It does feel very tenuous, though, of the regime there, more than it has in a long time.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But again, it's not about a threat from war. It's more about just make their economy, weaken their economy, and that weakens the support they do have. Because they do have support in the rural areas and the more conservative imams and all the rest of that.
Yeah.
But we have to make them feel the pain as well.
I thought this was about, the people. It seems as if a lot of pressure is being put on for Iran to bless. What is your response?
We have the great feminist leader, you know what I'm saying, Nancy Pelosi, advocating for starving women and children, man. Woo, Western fucking progressivism. It just makes you scratch your head. I also want to push back on even the argument that, this hurts women and children. This hurts boys. This hurts people that are not involved in the government at all. People that are not in the military, right? This is what sanctions is. Sanctions is essentially starving a country. This is what we're trying to do in Cuba. This is what we did in Venezuela. And so then whenever you see any type of resistance, right, you can never look at it as truly consensual resistance. People are resisting against the set of conditions that have been imposed upon that government. You have to ask yourself, why are these conditions being imposed? It's not about terrorism. It's not about any of those things, other than lack of compliance to American will. America does not wish for that government to be there. It doesn't matter that it is the will of the people that they be there. Now, again, this is not a geopolitical broadcast for liberals, because you have to look at actual facts. There were celebrations of the 49th continuation anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. There were estimates between 20 and 30 million people that took part of those celebrations. This happened less than a week ago. You cannot fall for the MSNBC bullshit about the Iranians, they don't want that government. They love that government because that government is them. This is a Shia majority country led by a Shia cleric. And that is the system that they have chosen. The government that they're trying to impose on Iran, it's not a democracy. They're not trying to impose, like, they're trying to bring back a Shah. These same liberals that are out in the streets with no king's protest are out there trying to install a Shah that is a puppet of the West, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Here's how you know they don't have the will of the people. They don't even want a democracy, because they knew if there was a democracy, the people would still vote for the Iranian candidates. So to ensure that everything goes the way that they wish for it to go, they want to install a Shah. And that's Nancy Pelosi, Mrs. No Kings herself, right? Just casually advocating for the starvation of a population.
Did you catch that she said, you know, we do have people out there in the rural areas, some of the conservative imams. You know, it reminds me a bit of Al-Qaeda, if you want to think of sort of the Wahhabism and, you know, sort of the Americans leaning on that. And I don't know if it was a slip up or whatever, but it's definitely something that I caught.
Right. When the irony is, like, Iran is actually one of the most progressive nations in the Middle East as far as gender. And this is just not something that's broadcast in the United States, right? The fact that there are women that are doctors, women that are like executives in corporations, right? You know, there was a speech that was being given by Saeed, the Dr. Saeed Mohammed, you know, where he's like, you know, and in case of the war, even the Taliban's talking about, you know, they want to help us fight, you know, because they understand that at the end of the day, we're just fighting against evil, you know. But, like, you know, we have differences because, you know, they don't want women to go to schools, and we're just not like that, right? And I'm just like, Americans have no idea about any of the cultural practices in these countries. They listen to what they're told on their favorite corporate news, and they believe that they have some sort of understanding. What would make you think that this 70-something-year-old white man sitting there with Nancy Pelosi has any idea as to the relative strength of the Iranian government? Like, do you think there's a dude that's going to Tehran? I don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not a dude that can name 3 Iranian cities, and yet he's telling you that the government's hold on the people is tenuous. Like, we gotta be fucking smarter than that.
Yeah, I mean, no, great points. And I think that most people understand that that is what's happening. They are trying to manufacture a war like they always do. Okay, so let's bring Europe into this because, you know, there's also been a lot of, you know, anti-Iranian sentiment over there in this collective West. So that may be coming to a close. I hope that it is, but there is some opposition. This is Mark Botinga, and he is a member of the European Parliament. Just want to listen to what he said.
Israel has a nuclear bomb. This is absolutely unacceptable. No, you call Iran the main threat, but look at Israel bombing Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, what else? Qatar recently. Secondly, why did you not condemn or even mention the fact that it was the United States that pulled out of the nuclear deal? It was not Iran, it was the United States pulling out. And finally, why did we not condemn, as the European Union, the illegal US-Israeli strikes on Iran, which made a lot of civilian casualties, and which made nuclear diplomacy more difficult, not less difficult? And we're saying, hey guys, we're the good guys, we care about nuclear non-proliferation and about human rights, while we're worsening the situation. We're imposing sanctions that hurt ordinary Iranians, that have it more difficult now to buy medicine, to buy basic goods. And let's be honest, our policies have only one goal, and that is weakening Iran in order to turn it into a new Syria, a new Lebanon, a new Iraq. And that the people of the region will not stand for.
So in one world, you have Nancy Pelosi saying, well, we'd like to destabilize their country economically and have the people suffer so much that they try to, you know, implement their own regime change. And then you have, you know, Mark Batinga, who is now, you know, speaking, you know, talking about, hey, guys, these sanctions hurt Iranians. They hurt the people. They destroy the country. And the fact of the matter is that most of the Iranians, like the way their government is, and certainly like it more than the Americans.
Whatever would come afterwards, exactly. Right? I mean, look at how long it's taken Iraq to get its footing after a good old American democracy. You know what I'm saying? But that's also an interesting point, right? Because the Shia minority have flourished in the new Iraq far more than they ever did under Saddam, right? And they're very tightly aligned with the Iranians because they share faith. Right? These are things that go beyond politics. This is what I continue to say when we talk about the danger of like, oh, we're just going to hit the Ayatollah. So first off, again, that's a religious leader, which will spark chaos that really no one can calculate. I mean, the implications of striking a religious leader or capturing him, like the Maduro option, like that is just a whole nother world of chaos that you're introducing because it will not end there. Like, even if you were to succeed in the operation, which is incredibly unlikely, right? The chaos that would ensue would be immeasurable. For example, right now, Iran is doing naval exercises in their backyard, right? And they have temporarily closed the Straits of Hormuz, of which anywhere between 30% to 40% of the world's oil passes through. Okay. So imagine if that was like a full type war type situation. Then it's not going to be an exercise anymore. That is going to close. Okay. And that we've spoken about the volatility that, like, when they're talking about economic warfare on the Iranians, this is the Iranians' response: economic warfare against the United States. Because if you close the Straits of Hormuz, you force a type of inflation, a hyperinflation on the American process that is just, no one knows where that ends, right? Like, everyone is leveraged to the hilt already. People got 2 and 3 jobs, you know, and that's just to get it where the gas is now. What happens when gas goes up 50% in a weekend and stays that way for a month? You see what I'm saying? Like, it does not take a lot of effort for them to push back in very serious ways. And please understand, this will not just be hurting America. In fact, America will probably suffer the least, right? Europe will be obliterated in such a scenario because they've cut themselves off from the Russian oil. Like, Americans still buy Russian oil, ironically, you know? But there is no way for the only countries in Europe that are buying Russian oil right now, right? Again, you have to understand there's only so many places you can get these things. Venezuela, which is a totally different oil process, and now the Americans have captured that. It's going to take years to bring that back online. You have Russian oil, which is extremely abundant, but incredibly sanctioned, and almost nobody in Europe uses it except for Romania and Bulgaria. And even they won't be able to use it in another year or two because of the rules that the EU has made. And Middle Eastern oil. All Middle Eastern oil becomes, and of course, American oil, right? So, and that's why I say, again, the Americans will not suffer as much as the Europeans, but we will feel that pain. That will be economic war brought back to us, you know, and it makes you wonder how, you know, it's just a game that no one knows where the bottom is.
Let's just take a look at this, if you don't mind, and maybe you can sort of help me understand what this is about. But it says here 1/3 of the U.S. Navy fleet deployed for Iran. This is from being reposted by Bryce Green, saying Jesus Christ, is about to be a brutal, murderous disaster. I think that's sort of what you were getting at. Can you talk a little bit about what, you know, these naval quote unquote assets is and what this chart might be showing us? Sorry for our podcast listeners. Maybe for our podcast listeners, try to, you know, talk it out visually if you can.
And definitely feel free to go to Inner City Left. We will have all of these graphics on there as well. Okay. So, and by the way, an update is we're up to close to 40% of the United States naval strike force. Yeah, it's more than 33%. We have 2 aircraft carriers. We have 17 missile destroyers. But look, here's the thing. We've talked about this a lot. You know, all my friends down south for shooters. I was talking to one of my homies a couple of years ago, and he was thoroughly unimpressed with the Russian pace in Ukraine. You know, he's like, America would have bombed the hell out of all of that by now. What the fuck? You know, that's what America does. America can bomb. They can fire missiles, right? But you win wars by putting boots on the ground. Unfortunately, that's also the most dangerous thing you can do. Put boots on the ground. That's what Russia's doing in Ukraine. They're putting boots on the ground because it's the only way to really occupy and hold land. You know, you bomb it, someone goes somewhere where the bombs ain't, or you dig deeper, you know, and when they're done bombing, you come back. That's what they've done in Yemen for years, you know. This represents a significant commitment and capability for strikes. But again, it represents a blitzkrieg because the reality that the Americans don't sell to the regular people is, man, this stuff ain't running off vibranium. You know, even when you're talking about like a nuclear aircraft carrier where the power itself is coming and you don't have to take it back to dock for energy, people still on there, man. There's only so many missiles on there. There's only so many bullets on there. There's only so much fuel for the planes. There's only so much food. You see what I'm saying? You cannot stay deployed in a forward position like this for too long because the logistics of it are just unreasonable. There's no other place that can resupply this amount of force. Never mind the fact that these stores are much lower than Americans assume them to be because they've begged, borrowed, and stole to keep the Ukrainian army afloat. You know, so like our stores aren't even what they used to be. You know, it looks like they'd be capable of doing a very powerful first strike, you know, and maybe go for a couple of days really hard, you know. But you got to remember, the Ukrainians and the Russians, they missiled each other all the time. Like, you know, like Russia spends almost 1,000 missiles a month on Ukraine. Zelensky's still flying all over the world, drinking, you know, champagne and whatever else, you know, fun shit he's into, you know, as he tweaking his nose. You know, missiles alone, as a rule, cannot bring down governments. Historically, that's just not what happens. They're great to threaten. Here's the other thing. Iran's missile capacity is exemplary. It's far better than any enemy we have ever faced, right, in direct combat. Saddam Hussein would have cut his left nut off to have the offensive capacity of Iran. Never forget, it was the Israelis that tapped out in the 12-day war. And that's after achieving the surprise condition and having an incredible first couple of days, right? The longer that fight went, the worse it got for Israel. Motherfuckers singing on the internet, songs is already bombed. They got TikTok sold. How about that? You know what I'm saying? They made it illegal to even film what was happening in Israel. And yet, boom, boom, every day, you're still seeing these videos of the Iranians scoring hit after hit after hit. And the regime, I don't want to say regime, the Iranian government still maintains to this day, they didn't even use their best shit. Now, they've stated explicitly in the event of hostilities, they will no longer fight a defensive war. They will fight an offensive war. Even Lindsey Graham, who is still advocating for war, has straight up said there will probably be Americans lost. So you have to ask yourself, why are you advocating for Americans? Like, as it stands, the Iranians have no capacity to strike the continental United States of America. So then how can you sell them as a threat to me? How can you then excuse the loss of American soldiers, especially if you're a conservative, right? For a country that has no capacity to strike the mainland United States and has expressed very little interest. They mostly just say, leave us the fuck alone. But we're being told right now they have to take a new deal. And that deal is worse than the JCPOA, which, as you have already acknowledged, and so did the EU MP. Iran wasn't the one that broke that deal. Trump did, and they want this country to give up enrichment. They want this country to give up its missile tech. What country would do this? Right? Israel gives up nothing. As soon as this is done, Israel will absolutely, undeniably move in and topple the government because the government will have no ability to defend itself, right? I mean, and this is not projection, right? Within 48 hours of Assad leaving Syria, the Israelis bombed all of their surface-to-area missile batteries, which countries need for self-defense. A SAM site is explicitly, by definition, a defensive weapon. It is not an offensive weapon. And the Israelis, within 48 hours of Assad being removed from Syria, bombed all of them. And now Syria has no ability to defend itself from the air at all. Why would a country put himself in that position, right? Like, you don't have to love the Iranians to understand why the government resists the demands of the United States and the West.
Yeah. And it does look like a pretty large force. 40% is a lot. So, it's one of those things where, like, I know we don't want to report on a war that's being built up because obviously the war is already happening and it's either on a standstill or at some point, I think we know. And you heard, like you said, Lindsey Graham kind of already mentioned it. People are normalizing and getting the population ready for losses of American lives, major missile impacts. And obviously, Israel was hit very hard, like you said, during that escalation between Iran. So when they use their big boy missiles and when they use the things that the Iron Dome cannot stop, then I don't know what's going to happen. But I think it is important to, again, just kind of like how we talked about Maduro and in general, like we talk about Syria, we are anti-war, okay? Because war brings a lot of pain and suffering. It brings things like mass sexual assault. It's just a part of war. I don't want it to be that way. It just is.
Of all the things that humans do, war is the worst. And that's just the bottom line. You can't be a progressive and be pro-war.
And this is the problem I have with the Democrats and the Pelosi's and the AOCs, which you didn't even talk about. They are pretty much okay with the wars. They might want to handle it different. They want to do the PR different, but regardless, you just got a different brand. One guy's, Don Draper, and the other guy is another agency. So you decide. Let's move on here. Let's talk about Japan. Let's talk about Sanai Takaichi wins supermajority in Japan election. Prime Minister, Liberal Democrat Party gains 2/3 majority in stunning landslide victory. This is from Agent of Change. Extreme China hawk and defender of Japanese militarism, Sanai Takaichi, has won a 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives. That puts her in a strong position to overturn Japan's peace constitution and prepare the country to participate in the highest level in any future U.S.-led war on China. Dangerous development. Your thoughts on her winning, and do you agree with that tweet?
I mean, look. Here's the thing about Takaichi. I find America's fascination with Takaichi on brand, right? It makes, she's incredibly popular, right? And this goes back to in Japan, she's incredibly popular because she represents that girl boss type of feminist that they've been trying to sell to Western women for the past 100 years. Now, let's talk a little bit about the name, the Liberal Democratic Party. Sounds very left wing, right? Sounds very liberal. It's in the name. But the reality is, that's just the way Japanese parties name themselves. And they all have variations of this, right? You have the Democratic Party, right? You have the Democratic Liberal Party. You have the Liberal Party. All of these different political parties in Japan have that in the name because it's meant to sound non-threatening. But the reality is, the Liberal Democratic Party is by far and away the most conservative party in Japan. Very militaristic. This is a person who goes back and prays at all of the war criminals that led Japan in the war, where she goes to those shrines. It's a huge embarrassment. Even some people in Japan critique her for these things. And this goes back to, again, right, when we talk about the wholesome practice in feminism as practiced in the West, in the Western world, right? And Japan is certainly a Western world acolyte, right? How can you be a feminist and you go and pray at the shrines of the generals that led things like the Nanking rape, the rape of Nanking, also called the Nanking Massacre? In Japan, they call it the Nanking Incident, right? And this has been a point of contention in China for quite some time. You know, people joke about, oh, will China go to war with Taiwan? Most of the time when you ask me that, I would say the odds are incredibly low. There are things that they could do that would make it happen. Like, if Lai Ching-te, who is the president of the semi-autonomous region of Taiwan, if he was to declare full independence, that probably would create a Chinese military response, because Taiwan is part of China, as is recognized by the United States and, 180 other countries in the United Nations, right? So like only 16 countries in the world that recognize Taiwan as a country, and they're all like Micronesia and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? That might cause a military response. But more than that, more than any other thing, China wants to do this slowly, economically, because they still see Taiwanese as just Chinese, and most Taiwanese see themselves as Chinese. Japan's another matter. There is incredible enmity in China for Japan. Incredible. I would say the only country that probably has more enmity with Japan than China is North Korea. Except North Korea has its own problems, so they can never really deal with Japan. But that's a big part of why they will never reconcile with South Korea, is the way that South Korea has reconciled with Japan. You have to remember, or maybe as an American learn, everything you think about the Germans and the Nazis in World War II, the Japanese were far more brutal. They killed far more people. They killed almost 30 million Asians in their assault on Far Asia during World War II. And not every country has forgiven them. North Korea has not forgiven them. China has not forgiven them. Vietnam has not forgiven them. The Philippines have not forgiven them, right? When you talk to the people on the street, no matter what the governments say, but some of the governments are also openly hostile, and North Korea and China are they're preeminent. When Takaichi says things like she'll come to the defense of Taiwan, that is a deeply cultural slight that goes across in Asia that most Americans have no understanding of. Taiwan was one of the first provinces that was stolen from China by Japan in the Second World War. And so when Takaichi says these things, it's incredibly inflammatory to the Chinese. There's a very low chance that the Chinese will go to physical war with Taiwan, because they love and respect the Taiwanese people, because they see them as themselves. There's an extremely high if there's anything that could bring the dragon awake, it would be Japan. And Takaichi is on that path. She's on that path. And again, right, when we talk about like, oh, Communist Party China, they're a one-party system. The Liberal Democratic Party has ruled Japan for almost 40, 50 years. You know what I'm saying? Since the Second World War. What is that? If you have other parties, but one party just always wins, which also reminds me of South Korea, up until 1981, until 1981, no, 1988, the military literally ran South Korea, right? Like, so these people that have this imagination, like, oh, South Korea is a democracy and it's good, and Japan is a democracy and it's good, but China is evil, it's authoritarian. Like, what are your rules for authoritarianism? That's all I want to know is, like, be consistent with that shit. But Takaichi, she puts the East in a real war footing. And the reality is, Japan wants to live back to that glory. They have that island syndrome. England has the same thing where they want to remember their power of years past. And it's a very different China. They have zero attitude, zero appetite for playing games with Japan. If Japan goes down this path, Japan will be smashed. China is not Russia, and Japan is not Ukraine. China will freaking obliterate Japan, and that would be very fast. And of all the countries in the world that are most likely to engage that part of the Chinese spirit, Japan is number one. And so once again, I'm reminded of there was a girl I was dating once, and she was like, "Tell me what wars did women ever start?" And I'm like, "Be a student in history, baby, please." Like, Takaichi is definitely about to do that.
Yeah, and there's a really good movie I just watched called Dead to Rights. It's a Chinese film, and it's about the massacre in Nanjing. So I would suggest if you
highly recommend that movie. But it's hard. It's a hard watch. Ooh, it's a hard one. But if you want to know more about the Nanjing, first I'll read a fucking book. But if you would like to have just a primer, check the movie.
Yeah. Let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Fables, Foibles, Other American Sins. Sorry, right there. In the description, we got new music out and about. Me and TMK, Lil Tanky, everywhere you find music. And patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. We're growing. We're getting bigger and bigger. Every single time I go on there, we have more people engaging with us. I don't know if I showed you this, Tanky, Inner City Left on our Instagram. I don't pub it as much, but it's such a large platform for us. We've had like, SZA liking some of our posts, athletes all across the world. And I only say that because you guys know that we put out, really, for the most part, in the weeds, like leftist geopolitics, anti-imperialism stuff. Of course, we dabble a little bit in kind of celebrity news and memes and things like that, but they're still very, I think, very leftist, very commie, very socialist. So we're happy to see those positive things happen. And we appreciate, kind of the vibe, whether you're hitting us up on Instagram or Patreon. We really appreciate that. And we're growing, and yeah, like, if we ever take a little break or something, know that we're probably most likely just trying to improve.
We just tooling up, baby. We just tooling up.
Yeah. Final thoughts? Anything we missed, Tanky? Anything else you wanted to discuss?
There are repeated rumors of a leak of programming at Palantir. One of the you remember the good old days when you just be like, Monsanto is the world's most evil company, right? Like, how hard it would be now to like literally be like, well, you could say Nestle, you could say Monsanto, you could say Coca-Cola, But Palantir is certainly in the rankings. You know, they are, oh boy, they're probably a top 5, you know. They're new to the game, but boy, they're racking up major numbers. And there appears to have been a leak. You know, if there's more information that comes out about that, we'll definitely circle back and let you know. But, you know, seems to be a little bit of trouble in paradise at one of the world's most evil companies. Look out for any news about the Palantir leak.
Yeah. Well said. For Amoja Little Tanky Summer, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.